First of all, I would like to introduce a term that we use in chess. This term is tempo. For those of you that have studied music or perhaps Italian, you will know that this word just means time. And that's exactly the same thing that we are talking about in chess when we mention the word tempo. Remember I said that the opening is a race to get your piece out as quickly as possible. Well, every move that you spend not getting your pieces out, or just doing a random pawn move perhaps, then you are wasting time. And every time you do this, we say that you are a tempo down, because you should be developing your pieces in one move. Now, for example, I'm going to load up her game, and I'm going to show you an example of when white sticks the opening rules, but black does not. So, e4, developing, or helping develop, remember pawns aren't developing moves. This is controlling the center and helping the bishop get out. So black replies doing exactly the same thing. Developing the knight, not on the rim where it's dim, and helping aim toward the center, controlling the center, and also making an attack on the pawn. So black replies with knight to c6, which is a great reply, because you are defending the pawn, as well as developing a piece. So the play has been very good by both sides at the moment. And white now develops a bishop. So you notice that white hasn't developed both knights before he's developed this bishop. He's now developed this bishop because he is looking at a castle next go. And just carry on speeding on with his development, which is great. Now, black is going to do the exact same thing, but he is decided to play a bishop to b4. Now, the problem with this is that, yes, you may be developing a piece, but when we say we want to develop our pieces, we want to not just move them as well. Remember, developing move is actually getting them out to a square which is doing something. So sometimes I often see people just making a move which doesn't actually develop the piece. This develops a piece to a much more active square, but it can be attacked. So we don't want to develop it to a square where it can be attacked, and helps improve your opponent's position as well. So for example, and this is what I often see in a lot of students' games that when they're practicing. And this bishop b4 move is played, and white simply just replies with c3. Now I know a lot of you might be thinking, well, actually I wanted to move my knight to that square, so I don't like that move, and actually it doesn't help development because it actually restricts the knight's movement. But the idea is that you want to then play this d4 move and get 2 pawns in the center, which is what we said would be absolutely ideal if your opponent could let you. So now I often see opponents going back to c5 with their bishop, and then white can play d4. And so now they've got 2 pawns in the center, and they've got great control of the center, and now this bishop has had to moves again. So I often see a lot of games beginning like this. I mean, now if you think about follow the path of his bishop, it started on f8. He then went to b4. Then he went back to c5, and now it's on b6. So you've spent 1, 2, 3, there you went, 1, 2, 3 moves with that bishop when you didn't need to. Remember I said that you want to develop your pieces in one go. So you spent 3 moves with that bishop, whereas white has now got great control of the center, got 2 pieces out, and it's actually white's go, so perhaps he can actually castle if he wants to. So in terms of development, white is just much better here. Now, this sort of thing happens in a lot of games. There are lots of openings out there which are well-respected openings, but some novices try to play them because I've seen them in games and they don't really understand them, the meaning behind them. For example, let's take a look at an opening called the Alekhine. The Alekhine starts off as white is e4, but then it's when black plays his knight out to f6. Now, in terms of all the things we've learnt so far about the opening, can we think of anything that's wrong with this move? Now, the knight developed, so it's a developing move, so that's not wrong. It's not got on the rim where it's didn't, so that can't be wrong. And it is sort of controlling the centre because it's aiming at these two squares, which is two of the central squares. So what exactly is wrong with it? Well, it's a well-respected opening, so therefore it can't be much wrong with it. But there is a way that white can gain more time and attack the knight again with a move that helps improve his position. So, for example, white can now play e5. Now, I know that it's just moving a pawn, and this shouldn't count a developing move, but it's helping control the centre and making the knight waste a tempi. So, now when this knight moves, he probably should go to d5, which is what the main line of Alekhine suggests. However, I see a lot of people coming into e4, which is definitely not a good idea. Now, I've seen a lot of games start like this, and the knight on e4, and now it gets attacked again and again. So, for example, white now can play d3. And you see with d3 again, it's not as such a developing move, but it's helping gain time by making the knight move again, but it's also allowing this bishop out, and what this bishop's actually doing is controlling this g5 square, so its knight can't go to there. So actually, if we look at where the knight can go, it can't go to g5, as I just mentioned. It can't go to f6 because of this pawn, nor can it go to d6, which is why this pawn on e5 is looking quite good. It also can't come forward towards the enemy territory because it's just too well defended. So it cannot come to g3, nor can it take on f2 because it will be captured back. Can't go to d2, nor can it go to c3. So it's actually only left with one square c5. So despite this knight having its octopus-like character, it's actually only able to go to one square, which is c5. So now again, white can play d4. Putting his pawn further into the centre, now freeing a diagonal for this bishop to come out, gaining time again on this knight, and so the knight has to move yet once again. And this knight's got a little tricky decision because he doesn't really want to move to the rem, so go to a6 or a4 because we know it's din there. It was just on e4, and we really saw it hardly had any squares to go to, so if it goes to e4, it probably would get trapped with a move like f3. And it can't go to b3 or d3, so therefore it's left with a move like e6. And now d5 could be played here. And I know that I'd said that, again, pawn moves shouldn't be counted as development, but you see how much time you've gained because you've managed to get two pawns, not just in the centre, but even further advanced in the centre, controlling lots of squares and restricting the development of black's pieces, while this knight has had to move over and over and over again. Now, this knight probably has to go to c5 now, and you see this position is just so much better for white because he can continue attacking this knight with more developing moves such as bishop e3, or he can simply just bring out his knights to f3 and c3, and his bishops have both got great squares to go to, and then he can castle. So white has lots of space, lots of tempi in development, and so he's just much more superior in this position. And this has come from the Alekhine, but it's obviously gone wrong because the players who do it haven't fully understood the ideas behind the opening. This sort of thing can happen in a lot of very well-known openings. For example, the Queen's Gambit is one of the biggest openings that's played amongst top grandmasters. And I'm going to introduce the word gambit because a gambit is a pawn sacrifice in the opening, usually. So usually give up a pawn in order to gain something back, and this is usually in the form of time and space. And the Queen's Gambit starts with the Queen's pawn forward. So far we've just been looking at when we move the pawn in front of the King, but this is the Queen's pawn's opening. And black usually plays the same way, and this is when the Gambit occurs. We play this c4 move, offering black to take this pawn for free. But what we want to do is then be able to try and push our pawn up in the center, perhaps the e3 or perhaps even e4. But most of the time, black usually declines this gambit because he doesn't want white to take full control up center. So a very, very popular move amongst our novices is this knight f6 move. Again, looks like it follows all the rules of development. Knight out, not on the rim where it's dim, taking control of the center. It's actually moving a piece out of the way to help and speed up castling. So what exactly is wrong with this move? Well, the fact is, remember I said when you're trying to develop, you want to put them onto squares where it doesn't allow your opponent to gain a tempo. So now white can actually capture this pawn on d5. And black can capture in two different ways. He can either play queen takes or he can play knight takes. So, looking at this, if we played queen takes, we're actually breaking a rule that I'm going to come to next. But this allows white to play knight to c3, where it attacks the queen and makes the queen move again, and therefore gains tempo. If black decides to take it with the knight instead, then we can actually play e4, and this knight has to move again. We have two pawns in the center, so for example, if the knight goes to f6, then white can simply play knight c3, and you see that he's got 2 pawns in the center, a knight out already, and his position is just a lot better than black's already. And this comes from a position in the Queen's Gambit. And tempi is a very common feature about gambits, and we will cover those in another DVD. But for example, if I was to show you an idea of a very popular gambit called the Evans Gambit, and this starts off very similar to what we have seen before. In fact, when I first showed you an example on tempi, this is exactly the sort of thing that that was done. The knights come out, bishop c4 and bishop c5. Now, white has so many different continuations here. He can either play d3 or castles, which all help development, but this gambit is actually b4. Looks very strange. It doesn't look like it's helping development, but the idea is that we hope for this variation, and that black captures the pawn and accepts the gambit. White would then play c3, again the same sort of idea as we saw before, with the hope that if they come back to c5, white can then take control of the center with this d4 move, gaining time and gaining lots of space for perhaps this bishop has got lots of space to move here now. So that's an idea of the Evans Gambit. Now, there is also a very popular idea that I've seen in so many junior games, and they learn a lot about this f7 square, which we will do later as well. And they get told it's weak, and they see some ideas, and they desperately try to make this one idea that they've seen work. So the same moves as we've seen many times before, I'm going to really reinforce his ideas into our heads. So again, same sort of moves are brought out at the beginning of the game. Bishop c4, bishop c5. We've already seen this in the last example. I played b4 to show the Evans Gambit. But instead, now white plays a bit more sensibly, and he plays d3. Because what white is wanting to do, he wants to try and target this pawn. And an idea to do this is to play this knight g5 idea, but at the moment knight g5 can't be played because the queen will simply take it. So white decides to play d3 here to support his center and allow this bishop to come out and defend this square. So after black continues his development and plays knight f6, developing his knight and trying to allow himself to castle, white then gets very excited and realizes that he can now play knight g5, attacking this target square, which he has been wanting to do for such a long time. Now, what is the problem with this? I mean, it is quite a weak square. it's usually quite difficult to defend, but actually black has a move that he intended to anyway, which does defend that squares, therefore makes this plan not so good for white. So if he spotted it, it was actually just castling for black. Now, black has got control of the centre, he's developed his pieces and he's castled. Those were the three important rules that I said earlier on in this chapter, and black has achieved all of those things at the moment, whereas white hasn't quite done so yet. And now white thinks that he can destroy black's king safety, and I've seen this so often in games. He decides to take on this square and attack the queen, and hopes that after rook takes, bishop takes, and king takes, the king has now sort of moved out more into the open and has lost his castling structure. So white usually feels that he's much better. But if we take a look at this and think of everything we've done so far, do we honestly think that white is better in this position? So let's think about all those different things that we've learned. Control the centre. Well, white's got a pawn in the centre and another pawn supporting it, so it's not too bad, but black also has that, and he has more pieces aiming towards centre, so I think black's better there. Development. Now, black has three minor pieces developed already. He has these two knights and a bishop, all developed, so that's great. King safety. Now, white hasn't castled. Black has castle, it looks as though he hasn't, but he can easily solve that. So I think that in all, black should just definitely be much better in this position, and in fact he is. But many people don't believe this, so they see this as being better for white, but in fact they are wrong. And so many novices play like this, but if you think back to all the things that you should be doing in the opening, then there is no way that white can be better in this position. So if he sticks to the rules that you know, then you cannot go wrong. Therefore, this principle states that you should try not to move the same piece more than once in the opening.
Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe.